Here's your chat. You're on.
Good?
Yep.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Drones in Your Community. My name is Greg Butler. I am the Director of Local Government Academy. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Before I introduce our speaker, Dave King, I would just like to mention that as Dave is presenting, if you have any questions, and you do not, if you have a YouTube channel, you'll be able to chat directly through the YouTube Live, which is the medium we're using to broadcast. If not, and you're not able to use the chat feature, I would ask that you just please bring up my email address. It's gbutler@localgovernmentacademy.org, and just send me the email. So after I introduce Dave, I'll be at a separate computer looking for any kind of questions. You can ask them as the presentation is happening, and I'll bring those back into the studio where I'll ask Dave the questions, and he'll be able to provide answers. So again, thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the class. Before we get started, I just want to run through some of the programs we have over the next month or so. And I do this usually. I'll keep it very short, and you can find more information on our website. If you're not familiar with Local Government Academy, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan, and non-advocating organization that generally provides education for local elected and appointed officials, and also zoning and building officials, and also managers and secretaries. We also offer internships, and I think we have a few interns on our webinar today. We placed 23 interns this summer, so hi if you're out there. Thanks for joining. And we offer technical assistance to communities that might be having trouble with certain processes or policies. And when available, we offer grants. We currently don't have any, but we're working hard on getting some. So thanks again for recognizing us, and spread the word if you can. So real quick, a couple classes. Again, they're on the website, so I won't spend too much time. We have next week on Tuesday in Duquesne, we have a great forum of 6 panelists to discuss how to attract and build community residents and build resilience through cultivating diversity. We have some of the best content experts in the city at this event. There will be a light dinner. If you could join us, it's not too late to register. It is free. And it's a great networking opportunity also. This is a 3-hour session, and it's going to be a really, really strong subject. So please join us if you can. Also, next week we have an Act 13 webinar. And generally speaking, it's a discussion about the Act itself, some of the trends, how it started, and how the impact fee distribution is being handled, and how municipalities may legally spend revenue of those fees, spend the revenue from those fees, which varies amongst municipalities. Later on in the month, or next month, we have July 10th, right after the holiday, we have regulation of wireless facilities by local governments. And this is a really timely, important subject about how to manage your small repeater towers for cell service and so forth in the right-of-ways of your community. There is currently some legislation being considered that would affect it. So if for no other reason, please join the webinar so Dan Cohen can explain exactly where that legislation's at. It's very important as a municipal official that you understand the idea behind it and what the state legislators are thinking of doing with this topic. So again, more information on the website. This one's a little hard to read, I apologize, but we have coordinating road construction and repair with utilities. This is a great collaborative effort between Sustainable Community Development of Sustainable Pittsburgh, Connect, which is a member organization of the communities right around connected to the city of Pittsburgh, and then Pennsylvania 811, which is Pennsylvania One Call. We've all got together and we have created this webinar to introduce a new tool that is web-based and coordinates the efforts between municipalities and utilities. It's a brand new tool that was developed by Pennsylvania 811 and spearheaded by Connect. So those two folks are going to run the webinar, and it's a great effort. And since it's new, it's recommended that you come out and watch the webinar and see how it works. And we'll be doing a live demo on the webinar. 2 more, I think. Hang with me. Also in July, at the end of July, we have things I wish I had known about labor law when I started. And this really is Sean Warner from Campbell, Durant, Beatty, Palumbo, and Miller talking about from his years of experience, all of the issues that managers and supervisors have run into from an HR point of view. And he condenses that all into about an hour conversation, the top things you should know about labor law. Very good review if you're a veteran, but also if you're new, very good introduction. And then lastly, I think we have another Cohen Law Group webinar about negotiating cable franchise services. And this is also very important. We all have cable services within our communities. And what Dan's going to talk about is how to get the most out of that contract, ensure that you're maximizing it and you're realizing maximum service, and also cost savings. So that's all the way out in September, so plenty of time to spread the word and get some folks to sign up. And that is it. We're going to now bring up our main PowerPoint. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Dave King, who's here at the studio. Dave is the owner of Steel City Drones, who is the premier provider of drone services and education in the area. Underneath Steel City Drones is the Academy. Hopefully he'll get to talk about that a little bit. So if anyone's in need of training, Dave would be available to discuss that offline. So when Dave and I first talked about this webinar, I asked him to talk more on the level of, let's say I'm an elected official or a manager. I walk outside of my municipal building and I see a drone and I see the person operating it, know what questions to ask them, know what the situation is, know if they're legal or illegal. Of course, this isn't legal advice. Dave is not a lawyer, but he will talk about some of the regulations around this topic, and with the idea that when you have this conversation with experts or residents, you'll at least know the situation around it currently. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Dave King. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you, everybody. Again, my name is Dave King. I'm very excited to be here and talk to you a little bit about drones and the capabilities of drones, some of the pitfalls and things that come along with drones. And there's millions and millions of drones out there that are purchased every year now. Even though we're still in the infancy stages of drone technology, there really is a huge push for what we're, with drones. And everybody knows about drones, but yet there is so little education and knowledge about drones. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. We're just going to touch a little bit about everything. And then if anybody has any other questions they want to ask here in this webcast, I'll be glad to talk to them after I'm done with the presentation. And then if you also want to talk to me more off of line afterwards, I'll be glad to do that as well too. So we're going to talk about municipalities right now and drone technology. What are some of the things that drones are being used for? And really, there's four main big key elements of drone implementation right now. So that's the planning stage, the progress, inspections is a huge component and element of what we're doing right now, and also for the survey aspect of modeling and being able to provide a deliverable that is very accurate for survey grade applications. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is this for planning. Municipalities and a lot of companies are out there, they're going ahead and looking at using drones just to be able to see what they can't see from the ground. And there's a lot of things that, obviously Google Earth does provide a nice footprint to it, but sometimes they're not updated. And, there can be, even on some locations, there can be a 3 to 4 year lag in updating of pictures. So a lot of times we have to go up there and just see what the conditions are, and also just to be able to go ahead and take a snapshot of a potential site of what it would look like. It's a perfect example. If a high-rise was to be built, what would the views be looking like on the first floor, the third floor, or the third floor west wing, or something like that? So there's a lot of different things that drones can be used for in the planning stages of a development plan. Now, project progress updates. It's really a great way for clients to be able to see what is what actually is the status of their project. And from a municipality standpoint, some municipalities and communities are using drones to actually show taxpayers what their money is going toward. They're very tangible things that, when you're seeing a picture from a drone, that's a picture says 1,000 words. So we're able to go ahead and really show something very tangible to taxpayers that can really show. And there's there's no better way than a picture to show really what some of the capital and tax dollars are going toward. So here's an example I'm going to show you of a project that we did for Scott Township Municipality here in Pittsburgh, where they actually put a brand new pole in, and they actually came to the conclusion that their old pole kept leaking water, and it really was to be able to repair it would have cost more money than building a new one. So they had me go out there and take pictures once a month all the way from the last day of the old pole closing to the brand new of the new opening. Not only did I take pictures, but we also did video as well. Created a nice 2-minute catalog of montage of the project. As you can see here in stage 1, they're just basically outlaying down the outline of the new pole, and then start to actually go through each step. Right here just shows the building process all the way through winter. And then this is stage 4 here would be something that they did early spring and going into late spring. And then finally at the very beginning of summer, you can see that's the final project of what that looks like. And that turned out, and that was a very good project that they were very happy with. And that's an example of project progress and how municipalities are using them. A really important function and feature that drones are being used for is inspection work. It's probably the #1 thing right now. Being able to see things that you can't see traditionally or very safely, or it can't be very costly, or as time consuming or much more costly to do by traditional means. And here's an example right now that this is the Cary Furnace in Rankin, PA, where that's that chimney stack right there actually was becoming unstable. And so they had me go out there a few different times to take pictures of the stack, the entire exterior facade as well as the interior. And we were able to, and that right there, what you're seeing, the picture on your screen, that's actually a picture where we were able to take that at almost 100 feet above that chimney stack. So right there, that's a picture that's zoomed in almost to about 30 times optical zoom, where we're able to use zoom cameras and keep drones safely away from what we need to film. So that's an example. You can see the resolution and the clarity is very, very good. Survey is another type of application that's very popular right now, because on average, a survey could an engineering company could spend 3 or 4 days with 2 survey techs going out there and basically getting all the data that they need on site to be able to capture and to provide for a final deliverable for a CAD drawing. And drones now are able to really cut that time down significantly, which really adds, it's really changing the bottom line, the project cost overall, and improving not only getting it done quicker, but more efficiently. And this type of drone technology is called photogrammetry, and it's basically taking a series of pictures that's on a slide that you're seeing in front of your screen, and being able to tie them to specific geo points on the ground. And then all of these pictures are overlaid, and they can be put into a 3D point cloud in post-production. So we can take a series of pictures and then develop from this point cloud, which are millions of points of data, and allow it to then be able to go into what's called a 3D orthomosaic. And we can create digital 3D models based upon just pictures that we're just taking with drones with the camera looking straight down. So the technology is amazingly advanced in such a short period of time. And this is the final project right here. This is where we actually did a project for Castle Shannon, where they actually wanted a full quarter mile of a road in a development be able to be updated and mapped and surveyed. So let's talk about some of the dangers and the risks that are associated with drones. There are a lot of people, really wonder, what are they? And, with these things, there's a very big difference of perception among anyone that you might talk to about drones. Some people think they are very dangerous, and some people think they're more like toys. And in all reality, it's right in the middle, kind of where that is. So the first thing is that, inexperienced operators that aren't trained properly can definitely crash drones very easily. My experience that the average person needs to have approximately at least minimum of 150 flights of practice and experience before they're good enough to fly safe and be able to do jobs in a safe enough environment. And so they can so drones can crash, they can injure people, they can also damage property. Those are obviously the big things. And so thus with that said is, if the operator doesn't know what he's doing and they don't know how to maintain or perform the routine maintenance on the drone, basically the drones can fall out of the sky with no warning. Now a 5-pound drone falling at 150 to 200 foot, if it falls on someone, it's going to kill them. So that's the biggest things that, as a drone operator like myself, that I have to worry about when I'm going out and doing jobs. Also, drones can also fly away out of control. With the technology that's built into these new drones, they what I call and classify as easy to fly, hard to control. Hard to control meaning that the majority of the people that fly drones now, the technology is so advanced and built into them, you can basically be hands-off flying. And what that means is you can virtually take your hands off the controllers, and the drone will just hover there and not move. And that's with all this automation, position hold, and everything that's built into them. However, if those features and functions don't work, then that's the problem at hand. And that is a big concern. So if it's the operators that don't know how to fly manually, or they don't prepare properly for the worst type of situation that may arise, that's when these kind of issues happen. Now, privacy obviously is a concern, and that's on the minds of many, many people. What can they do? What can they, what can drones do? Can they see through my house? Can they see through my curtains? Can they see through my windows? Excuse me. So that's one thing that we're going to talk a little more about in the next few slides. And the last danger and risk, something that's always on my mind when I go flying, is a collision or a near miss with a manned aircraft. Helicopters, commercial helicopters, are allowed to fly as low as 300 feet. So drones are allowed to fly as high as 400 feet. And there's been times where even myself, helicopters can come out of anywhere at any time with virtually no notice, and until they were basically right on top of me. So, man, that is a very serious concern that I take very seriously. So let's talk about some of the facts that you may not know about drones. So the first thing is, right now, about 5 out of 10 operators, about half of the operators out there, are not licensed, certified, or trained professionally. They're just people that are going out there, going to your local electronics store, buying around in a range of somewhere between a $500 to $1,000 drone, and they're going and trying to go out there and trying to do commercial work, or trying to at least do commercial work for free to build up their portfolios. And they're doing it in a way where they're not licensed, they're not certified, they don't have insurance, and they're not protecting their clients. Now, about approximately 4 out of every 10 operators can't fly their drones properly. They don't know how to fly it manually without the automation, and they really don't have the necessary skills or the training involved to be able to do that. And again, that's because, you know, the drones have this great technology built into it. So if all the automation's working, it gives you this false sense of security that, oh, this is easy. There's nothing to it. And that's where, you know, with my operators that I train, we'll go ahead and introduce them to, you know, into flying. And we'll, what I call is the training wheels. We put them in where it's in a position, what's called position hold, where the drone's actually latitude and longitude. It's just basically held in the sky with position hold and the GPS system that it has. Well, then once they see, as soon as they start saying, oh, this is easier than I thought, I'll then go ahead and put it in manual mode, and then the drone moves away pretty fast. So that's something at that point where I take the training wheels off and they realize it's not as easy as they think it is. And one thing that a client doesn't understand is that a drone operator, what a drone operator does, that the client actually can be liable for any damage that the drone operator does, especially when a drone operator doesn't have any insurance and they don't have, you know, they're doing something illegally. So client can be on the hook for what a drone operator does. A lot of clients don't realize that. And likewise, standard insurance will not cover a drone accident. There is no business insurance, no umbrella insurance, no business liability insurance. An LLC is not protected. Automobile insurance, there is nothing that will cover a drone accident except for the very specific type of UAS drone insurance that I have to go out and get. We'll talk a little bit about that in a couple minutes. Drones are not allowed to fly in controlled or restricted airspace, and that's normally a 5 to 7 mile radius around the busy airports, and drones are not allowed to fly at night without special permission from the FAA. And you can see right on the screen right here, this is a perfect example of the different type of drones that are out there. The white drone that you see, the little white drone that's in the upper left-hand corner, that's your typical $500 to $1,000 Phantom 4 that you can buy at Best Buy. And it's just basically a low-grade, consumer-grade drone. Whereas you can see on the big aircraft on your right, that is a $15,000 commercial aircraft that can lift 40 pounds, and it has commercial-grade GPS system that really is made for commercial purposes. Again, the contrast from drones is that the aircraft on your right, in addition to being able to lift 40 pounds, it can handle approximately 45 to 50 mile an hour winds. The little aircraft that you see on your left, it's the gray one, upper left-hand corner, that probably has a maximum wind component of about 15 miles an hour before it becomes unstable. And what you see is those two in the upper left-hand corner, the white one and the gray one, that's what a lot of these operators are going out there purchasing because they're inexpensive. And that's what they're trying to use for commercial type of work for clients. That's a problem. So you might ask yourself, what are the credentials needed to fly a drone? It's actually rather simple. It used to be much more regulated where back in the days, I actually had to go out and get a license to fly an airplane. Since then, the FAA has loosened that up significantly and just require an individual to take a 60-question aeronautical test. And there is no flying proficiency test, so which is a big concern, in my opinion, from a standpoint of, again, a lot of the issues that are out there that I see. And that's a typical example of the FAA license. So let's talk a little bit about recreational versus commercial applications. There is a very specific difference between what you can do for recreational versus commercial. The very first thing, and this trips up so many different people, is the only that can be considered to be recreational flying, and it only consists of basically going out and flying in a park for enjoyment. Anything that falls under the furtherance of a business is considered to be commercial flying, which requires the FAA license and certification. Even if the business doesn't take one penny. Even so, for example, if there's a pastor of a church that goes out and buys his own drone, and he simply just wants to take some pictures to put up on his the church's website of the facilities, the building, whatever have you. That would be considered to be under a furtherance of a business, and he would have to have the FAA licensing to be able to get that. And that license is also called Part 107 for those of you that might be interested. So a couple other things. Recreational drone pilots are much more regulated to where they can fly. And 99% of the individuals that I talk to and that I just know in general do not understand this specific rule. And it's really, really important. Drone pilots are required to stay 5 miles away from all airports. And that's all airports, meaning anything where a manned aircraft can take off and land from. So that's including heliports. And I'll show that why that's significant in a second. I just wanted to find that, so for commercial drone pilots like myself, we can fly anywhere in uncontrolled airspace. So for example, in Pittsburgh, there's several smaller airports, Butler County, Zelienople, Washington County. All those airports are actually in uncontrolled airspace, where controlled airspace doesn't start until 700 feet. So from an FAA standpoint, I could literally take off at the airport and still be, with that, as long as I'm not hindering the airport operations, I'm fine to fly as there from a standpoint of an airport standpoint. Now, why that's important for going back to the recreational, as you can see on the picture here, and I hope that this comes out clear on the webcast. Basically, what you have here is 14 different circles. Each circle represents a 5-mile radius around it. And what you have here are out of all these rings, you have 2 airports, Pittsburgh International, Allegheny County. They're represented by the red and the purple circles. The rest of them all represents heliports. As you can see, in this is about a 15-mile radius of Pittsburgh, downtown Pittsburgh. And you can see how many different flying restrictions there are for recreational flying. The FAA requires you that if you want to fly in any of these areas of the circle, you have to contact the flight operations of that airport. And that would mean that if you're trying to fly near in a hospital zone, you would have to contact heliport operations to let them know you want to fly. Very, very few people understand that or know that. And none of this information is really very made well public. So when you go to Best Buy or Walmart or wherever it is to buy a drone, you're not going to have this information. They don't put it inside your drone. All these things, even if you're responsible and you want to do things right, it's very difficult for an individual to understand all these restrictions for recreational flying. And then here's an example of this controlled airspace. For me as an operator, I have a 7-mile radius around Pittsburgh International that I have to stay out of. And if I want to fly inside that red circle, I have to get a FAA waiver, which is a special permission to fly inside that. So, we're going to talk about airspace and the subject of who owns airspace. It is a gigantic, big can of worms. That's the simplest way that I can put it, because it really is a gray area out there. The FAA claims they own all the airspace above the ground. Now, if that was true, you wouldn't be able to put an expansion on a building or erect a fence, for example. You'd have to get the FAA's permission, and we know that's not the case. Now, the Supreme Court ruled that the airspace basically is public domain, and there's a very specific case that really goes into that. But this is from the 1960s, well before there were drones out there. And it doesn't even really define the height of where that national airspace actually begins. So that's what really kind of clouds this whole subject and makes it a bit confusing. Now, as an example, commercial helicopters are allowed to fly as low as 300 feet over your home, and they don't need permission. as an example. So therefore, drones are really the same way. If a drone was to fly over someone's property, it would be very, very difficult for a homeowner to try to sue that drone operator to be in their over their property. Sure, there are cases of voyeurism and peeping toms and stuff of that nature, but those things are very hard to prove as well, because the average drone camera is a very wide angle lens, and you wouldn't be able to see through someone's window even if you tried to. It's impossible. And therefore, and also by saying, I think that's on the next slide here, is that there's been several Supreme Court rulings that have deemed that no one can expect privacy from a public place. And what that means is, if I have my drone operator right on the main public road, and I am trying to, maybe let's say, for example, someone is trying to spy on somebody over into their property, that basically, that those rules say by privacy, that's over a public road or a public place. They can't expect privacy. So it's a very hard interpretation of the rule. And I am not an aviation lawyer, and I'm not going to say it can get very complicated. So it's not as cut and dry at all by any means as one may begin to think that it might be. Many municipalities have gone through the hassle of banning the drones from public parks as a starting step. But then also too is that some states have prohibited their own townships and municipalities from making their own drone rules. So that even clouds that up, especially when you have their own states making their own rules, and then some states are not allowed to make their own rules. So that kind of even makes it even more confusing. Now, the biggest thing that, and especially something that a very personal, important goal for me, and something that I try to do, is to try to provide education awareness to police officers in different communities, to let them know what the drone rules are, because it's really inconsistent across the board. If someone was to call the police about a drone, one officer may not think of anything and not think it's an issue whatsoever, and then another officer may arrest the drone operator for public endangerment. So it's really up to the interpretation of the officer, to the fact that how much they think that the drone operator is impacting safety to the community. And so it's very inconsistent across the board. Now, you may ask yourself, so how do I know? So if I see a drone in the air, how do I know it's being operated illegally? So let's go over just some of the basic points to that. So drones are not allowed to be flown directly over individuals or people. And that includes large public gatherings, such as baseball games, concerts. Most drones are not allowed to fly in congested areas, such as downtown Pittsburgh, because you cannot fly directly over moving cars as well. And you can see where you have hundreds of cars and all kind of different roadways, it would be very, very difficult to be able to maintain under the regulations of the FAA to not fly directly over anybody. And another example is that there is a 3-mile no-fly zone radius around sporting events like baseball games, NFL games, and such of that nature as well. So if you see any of those things happening, those are illegal operations for sure. So the next one, we'll talk about, so how close are drones allowed to be flown near people? The FAA goes into 2 pages of explanation under their Part 107 regulations as to what an operator is allowed to do. And it really is very clear. Directly over somebody means just that, directly over them. So if the drone would then just lose power and free fall, if it would then come down and land on somebody, that's considered to be directly over someone. If the drone would actually land 5 feet from somebody on the sides, then it's not directly over them. There was the older temporary regulations made it very clear that you had to stay a certain distance away from people, which is around 500 feet. That has since gone away, and that's why many people believe that there is like a certain rule of a distance that you have to stay away from people, and that is not correct any longer. So what operators like myself will try to do is that if we need to fly and capture an event, for example, where there might be a couple hundred people, what I'll do to be safe would be to use my zoom lens and then be able to stay several hundred feet away to be able to capture something in a safe environment. So there are ways for experienced drone operators to be able to run into and fall inside the FAA guidelines and still do things very safely. And so you might want to say, well, what if I need to hire a drone operator? Can you give me some advice on what I need to do? There's a few different things that you want to do. You want to get a copy of the drone operator's FAA license. And if you look back a few slides, you would see what that license looks like. And all drone operators should have drone insurance. And again, there's no other policy that's going to cover drone accidents except that specific policy that operators like myself have to go out there and get. The majority of the operators that are out there doing work for clients do not have that insurance to protect them. That's a really really big thing, because there's no other insurance policy that's going to happen. And I'll go over really quickly. I'll give you an example. There was locally here. There was a luxury realtor that had a $5 million property. They hired a drone operator to do the work for them. Now, the drone operator did have his FAA license, but he had no insurance. Well, he goes and does the job, goes out to the site, and as he's taking pictures, he's watching the monitor instead of the drone. The drone then hits a power line, and then the drone just falls and crashes down on top of a very expensive Audi. And that actually caused over $5,500 worth of damage. So what ended up happening was the operator told the owner of the car what happened, and then he said, well, how are you paying for this? And the operator didn't have a penny to his name. He was like 21 years old, didn't have a full-time job, and was just getting started out doing drone work. And he said, well, I could probably make out some kind of payments plan for you. That wasn't good enough for the owner, so he actually sued the drone operator, the realtor that hired the drone operator, and the property owner that hired the realtor. Sued all three of them and took them to court and asked for $40,000 worth of damage. And the judge said, well, you're not going to get $40,000 worth of damage, but I will award you $12,000. So each third party, had to pay $4,000 worth of damage. So that's just an example of how a client can be on the hook for a drone operator if they aren't doing what they need to be doing, which is, in my opinion, protecting the clients with insurance. Now, again, that's something I just talked about right there. Most operators can't afford it because of the high cost. If you do want to hire a drone operator, you want to make sure that their policy is at least $500,000 in liability coverage. That's the minimum type of coverage that you can get right now. And that is enough to be able to handle most type of accidents. I carry a $5 million policy because I do a lot of commercial work, but it ranges from $500,000 to $5 million. All right, so let's talk about. Tell me about some of the things that were going to be clear indications of someone who I should not hire. In my experience, there's a few different ones. The main one is if you ask the drone operator for the certification, and they give you excuses why they can't give you them. My scanner's broke or whatever have you. If they give you an excuse, that's a very telling sign that they don't have the certification. The second thing is if the operator tells you instantly they can do the job without asking you any questions. Like, for example, when I go ahead and do a job for a client, the very first thing out of my mouth is, what's the location? And then I say, okay, great, give me 15, 20 minutes. I'll call you back and let you know I can do the job. As an operator, I'm going ahead and looking at I'm doing a pre-qualifying of the site. I'm looking at it on Google Earth. I'm looking at it from a controlled airspace standpoint and all the different things that are going to tell me whether I can do this job in a safe environment. And then I will call the operator and tell them if I can do it, and if I can do it, what the cost is. That's a very good way to know that you're talking to a professional. And obviously, does the operator have the type of equipment to do the job, or is essentially what they're trying to use as a toy? So if they come on site to your on site and they're trying to use a tiny little thing that's going to just get it's like a paper airplane, that's not what you should be having done on your client stuff. Really, now with that said, that really is everything that I have. So I'm going to take this time now we'll go over and talk. I'll have Greg funnel me some questions if anybody has any, and I'll be glad to answer anything that you guys have. While I'm waiting for that, I'll try to go anything.
I did ask one question.
Yeah.
So
sure.
you mentioned that some states allow municipalities to make drone rolls or not make drone rolls. So do you know where Pennsylvania stands on that?
As of right now, Pennsylvania does not regulate that.
Okay.
Michigan does, West Virginia does, but not Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And so it's just a ball of inconsistency across the board.
I have received no other questions via email. It's not too late if somebody wants to throw in a quick question. I can go back and check.
Okay. I guess a couple things I can talk about. Some questions that I often get include, when are drones going to be starting to be used for deliveries? And so everyone knows and hears about the Amazon. Or is Amazon going to start using drones to deliver packages? Is my local pizza shop going to start delivering pizzas with drones? And I can give you a very good, honest answer to that. It ain't happening. It ain't happening in the near future, or in the even the intermediate future. Main reason why is that right now drones have to be flown line of sight. And what that means is you just can't program a drone to go up and fly and then go somewhere. That's not what the FAA has not allowed that yet. And there's a lot of potholes to that. For one thing, the flight time. A drone, there's no drone out there that's going to be more than typically 30-minute flight times. So flight times can be a very big consideration. The second thing is that if you program a drone to go down on the street, for example, there's no way of knowing where power lines are, utility lines, anything that the drone can hit. The technology is simply not that good yet, as of right now. Drones do have obstacle avoidance to them, but there is a limitation to what this technology is because it's still in its infancy stages. So with that said, and another thing, that manned aircraft and also flight controls would need to know where drones are at all times. In my opinion, that would require an entirely new air traffic control system. So you would have to have air traffic controllers have a simple, each drone would have to have a transponder to it, and then they would have to be, it would be almost a whole new airspace system. That would be a huge, huge undertaking. You're talking about a whole new infrastructure to air traffic control, new equipment, new processes, new procedures, a ton of money, a ton of investment, and that's not going to happen anytime in the near future. As of right now, what it just took, the FAA was over 2 years late in getting simple, basic commercial application policies and procedures for like us operators in place. We were like the last country in the world to have regulated policies for drones. So, in my opinion, the FAA does not have the resources to be able to go ahead and do such a dramatic undertaking in any kind of reasonable amount of time. If something like this was to happen, you're probably looking 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Nothing. I can't see anything inside of 10 years. So the answer to that question would be, if you're looking for deliveries with drones, it's not going to happen anytime soon. So that's a frequently asked question that I get about drones. Anything else?
No other questions.
Okay, well, thank you guys very much. Again, if anybody would like to talk to me after the seminar, you can always reach me at my email address, and I know it's not up here, but I'll just give it to you. It's real simple. It's dave@steelcitydrones.com, and you can also reach me on my you could go through my website, which is steelcitydrones.com, and also I have my flight academy is steelcityflightacademy.com. And like Greg was mentioning, my company is essentially two different divisions. Half of it is a drone acquisition service side, where we're actually going and getting content for clients. But we're also, the second part of it is a flight school, where we actually train individuals to really do commercial flights the right way. And then we also help corporations start the integration process internally. So we're a consulting, we offer consulting services and help them define what type of equipment they need, what they need to do, how basically a turnkey system to start using drones. So with that said, I thank you very much for your time and attention, and I look forward to answering any questions that you might guys have after this seminar. Thanks again.
That was a good one. That was good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I was a little